Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from digital marketing, sales channel strategies, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate sales. Now, here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Peters, CEO of Newer Appliances and Retail Band Digital Strategy Agency. Business owners, do you wish you had someone to create a custom strategic plan to grow your online sales, someone to show you how to execute it with the team you have? That's what I do. If you are lost, we can help you now. If you want to grow your digital sales, find me on LinkedIn or email me at luke@retailband.com. And specifically, we're talking about the homedepot.com, wayfair.com, amazon.com, and other digital branding assistance that you may need. All right, excited about this one. In this episode, you are going to learn and hear from Ryan Fernandez on how to move your manufacturing to Mexico and how the geographical change will help your logistics. Ryan's the CEO, co-founder of BRH2 Plastics, an OEM manufacturer in Mexico for Ford, Procter & Gamble, Munchkin, and others. Also CEO and founder of Boon USA, was the CEO and co-founder of Boon and remained as president following the acquisition by Tomy in 2011 until 2016. Ryan has an undergrad from George Fox and an MBA from Pepperdine University. Ryan, thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Hey, did I miss anything there on the intro?
Oh man, it was actually too long. I felt like I was a king being introduced into a room.
That's funny. Well, we try to give the audience some a little bit of perspective and a little bit about yourself. And so first, we'll start out with a little bit more about your business, and specifically, just for the audience, we're going to talk about nearshoring. And I know a lot of you guys are maybe selling products that are plastic mold injection, or some of your customers might be Walmarts or Targets, and I got a bunch of friends in those types of businesses. Well, most of those products were traditionally made in China, and now Ryan and his company are doing that here close to us in Mexico. So we're going to talk about that, and also how the supply chain is sped up and aided by that. So why don't you kind of just kick it off and tell us a little bit more about your business and what you guys make?
You bet. Well, I probably should kick it off too by saying how I came to be, because having started Boon, which you talked about in my introduction, having it be a retail products company. It was a baby products company. We started from the ground up and built it. The huge issue and that you start out with is, where are you going to source your products? Where are you going to make them? And obviously, we've heard that it'd be so great to make everything in the U.S. And there's some definitely realities to that. I think, growing up in Wyoming, being a little bit on the rural side, you'd love to believe that would be possible, but it's not. And I think those of you who make products out there know that it's not. I think designing, building, creating, brainstorming is what we're really good at, but then it's trying to find a place to make them. And so all of Boon's products were sourced in China. When I got a hold of Bumbo, they're sourced in South Africa. And so getting and any of you guys who know what a Bumbo seat is, they're those foamy floor seats that every baby sits in. They take up a lot of room for the amount of money. And so you can get 2,300 of them into a container, and that container has to come from Durban, South Africa, all the way to our 3PL warehouse here in the U.S., which can take 60 to 70 days. We sell anywhere from 30 to 50,000 of these a month. So you can imagine how many containers are floating on the water, how many are sitting in a warehouse, how many are on order. And you can imagine how long that cash flow chain is, where it's about 6 to 7 months before you see cash. And so we can have so much money being wasted. So that really drove me to think of how do we find a way to make it not so painful? And it really comes down to location and manufacturing. South Africa was an easy target. And so we started back in 2014, really trying to get this figured out. It was actually probably 2012, 2013. And we looked at Mexico because obviously from a labor perspective, there were some possibilities. Ran into a lot of issues of just not being able to find a good fit for us. We eventually came into a group, but then one of our partners that was sitting in my office in Phoenix, and he's like, Ryan, why are we basically hand-holding this group all the way through it when we know how to do it? We have the capital. we had the leadership, and two of the three partners speak Spanish, and so I was looking at them, and my wife was in the room at the time. She's the one that basically killed all my ideas. If I'm going to want to start a company, she's like, it's a terrible idea. And so this is one where she looked at me and she's like, duh. And so that was it. That's really how we started the factory, was out of the need to really cut some cost out of a South African product. And then it actually maneuvered its way into competing head to head against China. But that was a couple of years down the road when, maybe I should take a breath. Do you have any comments on that before I continue on? Yeah.
I was just going to jump in. So you guys are, working at another company, and you guys decide to start this, and that was around 2014. And how much capital did it take, if you don't mind, or give us a ballpark? And did you guys just literally go buy a factory in Mexico? Did you partner with somebody over there? People over here who've never thought of doing something like that, may want to know some of the, what it cost and kind of what were the basic steps.
Sure. It's not easy. And I'd love to sit there and tell you how easy it is. And it's not, because number one, you really have to navigate around the municipality, around the state, and around the federal government. And when you're dealing in Latin America, you're dealing with who you know and how you create a political relationship with them. And one thing we did good is we actually brought in one of the partners. His name was Hector from El Grupo Mason. And the Mason Group is $1 billion group out of Hermosillo. So he's a grandson of the big dogs, but he is still a member of that group. And so having his name tied to it helped us really kind of get into the municipality. And then my other partner, Hector Plasencia, he's a maven. He's just a communications machine, and just really had everybody. He's friends with the mayor. He's friends with the consulate general. He has everybody in his back pocket, and not from a back pocket standpoint of money, but a back pocket of friendship, which is really, really important.
Yeah.
And so you've got to kind of have the relationships is the biggest piece of it. From a money perspective, there's another issue, and that is any assets that are not on U.S. soil, a bank's not going to lend money on unless they have some type of treaty where they're able to seize these assets. Well, Mexico is not one of them. And so, and Mexican banks they don't have the ability to lend on assets because they don't have the system in place to collateralize to a single bank and have subordinated debt and all the different, products that we have available to us in the U.S. And so we had to fund it pure and simple, pure cash. And so myself, luckily I had just sold Boon and Keen Distributions to Tomy, and I was still acting as their CEO, but it was a pretty big sale. And so we were pretty well funded. But yeah, we paid for cash to get it going. We did not buy the building. We leased a building. You get to deal with lessors that are sometimes U.S. based. I think ours is based in San Diego. So you do a lot of transaction in dollars, which is nice. But it's a tough thing. I can keep going into that process.
Well, quickly, how long did it take start to finish? So you guys decide to do it. You got the funding, you got the connections, and how long did it take start to finish to where you're actually making product?
Probably about 6 months for phase one. And phase one was moving into a building with somebody already there that already had what is called an MX number, which is the ability to export out to the U.S. Or to any other country. So we basically rented their MX number. We used their payroll system. We used a lot of their machinations, and that was all tied into how much we paid for rent. And so we set up our machines in there. We had our small amount of space to start. I think we started with about 15,000 square foot with the ability to flex up when we needed to. And that was about a 6-month process. The problem was within just over a year, we were already too big and needed to flex into our own space. And so we rented a 70,000 square foot facility just down the road inside that industrial park, where we then had to move stuff in stages so we could keep up with our business.
Yeah. No, that's amazing though. 6 months, you guys moved. That's incredibly fast. It would seem to move that quick to a viable business. And then it sounds like you guys continue to grow. And then quickly, Ryan, just finishing up the story, tell us a little bit more about maybe an example of a couple products you could finish up that product from South Africa or any other, so the audience really understands kind of what you guys are making.
Sure. I think our expertise are in really three kind of arenas as we speak today. And that is, we do automotive. So we do some parts for Ford. They're in the process of moving away from the Ford Fusion and the Lincoln MKZ, and are bringing one of the Bronco versions into Hermosillo. And so we'll have some of those parts. And what we act as a tier 2 vendor to Ford through two companies called Magna out of Canada and then IAC out of Detroit. And so they get the parts for Ford, and then they divvy them out to tier 2s if they can't handle the production. So we do quite a bit of that. And those are usually black part, unseen, under the hood. We did do the bezels on the front. So that's seen. For the fog lights, we also did, the battery holder for those anyway. So for the Ford, we're in transition. We'll see that again. But then we step into our retail product arena, and that's where we're actually really good. And where we started was one of my old products that I owned from Boon, which is a baby products company. And we had an extra tool sitting in China, so we brought it over, and we make about 50,000 of these a month. And they're a drying rack for baby bottles and different things. And it looks like grass. It's a really cool product. And so we started shooting that and Tomy realized that they were beating China on a fully burdened landed cost versus just kind of looking at it as the FOB model. And that's really the first product that really took off. And that's where I knew, oh my gosh, I can compete against Southeast Asia. And walking into somebody's, office and saying, I can make your stuff, a 1 hour flight from Phoenix, and you may even be able to understand the language, and we can compete with China. It became a pretty easy conversation.
That's awesome. And how many team members do you guys have now, so we can get a sense of scale, or how big is your operation?
We're about 140 people right now. We have a pretty small front office of about 12 people. And then all the rest are operators on the floor, or packagers, or quality and safety, all of that. So yeah, about 140 today.
Great. And then we were talking, that you kind of share time between Wyoming and Arizona. And, of course, they have a U.S. operations as well. But just for the listeners, Sonora is in Mexico. It's about 6 hours south of the border. I think we were talking about that, a 6 hour drive, 1 hour flight. Talk to us about, you're working remote. What is the most important KPI? Obviously, you're on Zoom, you're talking to your team, you're CEO of the company, but what's the most important KPI that you need to track?
For me, and the fact that Hector is on the ground every day, well, basically every week, 4 days a week, we get a really good, he's really handling all the KPIs from the standpoint of volume and what's happening. Are we handling quality control? Are we getting too much waste? For me, I'm able to dial in and look at the daily reports that are more the financial kickoffs. And so what it allows me to do is say we're running at 18% to revenue with our labor, which is about exactly where we need to be. Or why are we at 20%? And Hector's like, well, with COVID, we've got a bunch of our people at home. We're having to bring in temporary workers. And so it's really kind of having my hand on the pulse of how the dollars work, because it gets very complicated, especially when you're dealing with peso conversions to dollars, and you're dealing with two companies, the SRL, that is the Mexican entity, and the U.S. entity, and how that goes back and forth, and exchange rate. It's pretty wild. So for me, Hector relies on me to be the kind of the financial strategist. And so I spend my life in the numbers, where I count on him to really manage the day-to-day operation.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's jump into this topic. And again, we're going to talk about nearshoring your supply chain. I think, the first thing I think about is, the shorter time period, more flexibility, new product launches with lower MOQs potentially, right? If something's, in your back door instead of, 3 week, ocean freight, or even longer sometimes, right? So that's going to be the theme. And why don't we start with this? Actually, this is kind of a quote, I think, from our back and forth prior to this, is that how to move people from point A to point B. Is that more of like a leadership comment on your company? I'd like to know kind of what you meant by that.
It really is. there's a lot of people, I always look at intelligence, and intelligence shows itself in such different ways. Either you're scientific smart, you're math smart, you're the arts smart. There's so many different ways. And I think for me in business, the art of being successful is being able to move people. So it's either moving your employees, it's moving your customers, but it's getting them to where this goal is and doing it in a way where both people win. And that's really where my education was growing up from my mom teaching us how to deal with insecurities and weaknesses and how to always be listening to what the other people are trying to say, to, studying psychology as the main focus of school, then moving into business. I think it all comes down to how people feel. And it's amazing to watch, our workers. We have a 10% turnover in a Mexican factory, which is unheard of. And we have not lost a single person from our front office in the 6 years we've started. We've only added people. And it's because we manage with that style. I mean, we care about our people. We care about if they're growing inside our business. And American management is very, very needed. American style management is very needed in some of these places that have really only known, us and them mentality or the rich and poor.
And what's like a specific example of maybe how you improve that culture? That would be kind of fun to hear.
Coolest story. So Hector and I had just been to a show in Mexico City called Plastic Mahin, and it is where, basically all the manufacturers of all the cool machines and plastic resins, they're all there. So we had gone to a couple of seminars, and we were back on the floor together at the factory. This is probably 2016. And we walked the floor, we talked to everybody, and Hector's down there, and he asked one of his operators who's running this 530 ton injection molding machine. And he asked him, he goes, "Hey, so we learned this new process, and we want to ask you to see what you think of it." And the guy goes, it's actually Leo. Leo goes, "I'll implement it right away." And Hector goes, "No, that's not really what I meant. I wanted to kind of get your opinion." And he, once again, he's like, "Well, I'll get it done, boss." And Hector goes, "Listen," he goes, "I really want your opinion. I don't want to hear that you're just going to do it. And is it a good idea?" And the guy goes, "Well, you are my boss, but no, it's not a good idea. And this is why." And Hector said, he goes, "I want to explain something to you." He goes, "This is not, I am the boss of this building. I'm the boss of making sure everything's going good and that you're happy." He goes, "But you're the boss of this machine. No one knows this machine like you do. I don't." And it was just so fun to watch the light bulb go off in this guy's face. Like, I am the boss. And I think that's the biggest piece, is that each of these people, every person in the world, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? But you want to feel like you've got control of something in your life. And Hector does an unbelievable job of these people believing in BRH2, bleeding, our blue and black, and really believing in themselves and being able to grow. We have people who've got cars for the first time in their lives, because they grow within the business. It's been a blast. I love it.
Yeah, that is a great story. Communication, trusting your team, giving them some autonomy. So, I guess it doesn't take free lunch, free dinner every day. These are like you said, these are just basic human needs. Listen, right now, nearshoring is a huge buzz term. Talk to us more about why. I mean, obviously we have the tariffs out there, but is there more to it?
I think there's a lot to it. I think, so what was really weird is we started it back in 2014, and I thought that was the moment, but then the administration, the presidency kind of went after the NAFTA deal, and China was kind of a love child in the way. And so it really slowed us down for 2 or 3 years because we didn't know what happened with NAFTA to be repealed. So everyone kind of pressed pause on shifting manufacturing. Well, then it was a trade war on China. USMCA got signed. It's actually a very good deal. And so everything just turned again. And so phones started ringing again. 35% tariffs are, even though they're not going to force manufacturing still to come to the U.S., it definitely made us a lot more attractive. In fact, in some ways, hugely attractive. And then Corona hit, and the issues that came with supply chain because of it being starting in China. And so you even have kind of a political belief there. But then outside of that, not being able to get product for a long time, it began people really taking a look at their supply chains going, they've been talking China plus one for years, but how many people actually do it? And so what this did is this made it so not only is it China plus one, but it may be replacing China if we can find somebody who does it. And now, I mean, Hector told me last night on the phone, he goes, I need you to stop talking to people because there's no more business development for a while.
That's a nice problem to have. Looking at it, so there's tariffs, prices are still sometimes cheaper in China. But, you mentioned earlier, fully burdened cost. How do brands still make that decision to go near shore? So again, we got, a lot of brand owners listening right now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to hear how you think about it and break down, the different decisions that,
sure,
have to be made.
Most of them are dollars, right? So you can sit there and say, okay, you've got this 40-foot high cube container coming from China to the warehouse, and that's going to be an all-in $3,500, $4,500 deal. So then you have how many products inside that container, and you can break out how much your costs are. Where if you're making it in Mexico, you're going to have an $800 dray from Hermosillo to Phoenix, or $1,200 dray from Hermosillo to LA to where your 3PL is there in a 53-foot truck versus a 40-foot high cube container. And so you're able to just with that piece of information go, I am saving this much against my Chinese counterpart, and it's significant. Number two, you said 3 weeks. I always say it's usually 30 days from door to door from China. So in order to do that, and you've got a customer like Target who counts on a certain amount of business, and they also have some upsides that you have to be able to cover them, you're going to have to say, okay, I've got a month on the water. I've got my order time, in which could be anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, and then you also have your stock of inventory that has to sit in your warehouse. And so when it becomes almost like a 3 to 4 month of inventory float. Where when you're near shore, if you're in Hermosillo, kind of like with our Munchkin counterparts, our customer, they say, hey, we want you guys to keep a week of inventory on hand. And oh, by the way, don't bill us until you ship it. And I'm kind of like, okay, you got it, because I want their business. Think about that for a second. I mean, we're sitting 2 days from their door. And so we've got the ability to literally slam a week of volume into them in 2 days. It's just so not only are we cheaper, but then you're taking a look at how much time you can save on getting the product to your warehouses, to your customer, but then also the fact that you don't have to keep 6 weeks to 8 weeks of inventory at your 3PL paying for that storage. You're able to kind of go just-in-time inventory and make it so you're cross-docking at the facility, or keeping only a week or two of inventory there. So now you're saving money at the warehouse and 3PL level. And then when it gets really crazy, Luke, and this is when it's really fun, is when you have the factory actually warehouse it, pick and pack, business to consumer, label it, take it to the border, and drop it off at USPS, UPS, or FedEx and have it go out. So now you're eliminating the 3PL altogether. And that's a huge cost.
Wow. And tell me more about how that works on time though. So do you lose still a day or two of shipping speed versus a US 3PL, or that's awesome, because everybody wants to simplify their lives, right? And if you guys you have it, you handle it, you pick and pack, you bring it to the border. How long do those extra steps take?
So quite honestly, what you're doing now is that there's the only extra step is that you have to drive it from Hermosillo to what do they call those free zones to get it there. And that's a 4-hour drive. It's the only extra step. So, and what's crazy is it was a little more difficult because you had to factor in every once in a while having maybe a customs delay or whatever. And so probably a year ago, we were struggling with it because the 2-day prime was always it had to be perfect. Well, since Corona's hit, 2-day prime means I'm going to get this in 4 to 8 days. That's how it feels to me. And I think people have kind of begun to relax a little bit on expecting that product so fast, so that that if it's 3 to 4 days or 2 to 4 days, it works in the model. And we're seeing that we're getting closer and closer there. Now instead of direct to consumer, take that model where you're actually shipping from the factory floor and trucking it directly to Target's DCs or Walmart's DC. So you're still bypassing the 3PL. it can also happen in the big box an EDI world just as like it can in business to consumer.
Yeah, well, so many questions inside there. So now, when typically when you're ordering from China, it's a 30 to 60 day lead time for production. I mean, even longer now because right now it's just so backlogged. And then it is about 3 weeks to the port, but then the port drayage to the warehouse. And right now, all bets are off because the supply chain the supply chain's a disaster as well. So it's like on both ends of it, it's a huge mess right now. How long are the lead times? And again, not just with your firm, but just overall in Mexico, is it still that there's a lot of orders in queue and it's 30 to 60 days, or are you guys a lot quicker on the lead time on the production side as well?
Well, what we've done is we're at full capacity, but we're producing what we can produce for the customers that we can have. And so there's 2 or 3 customers that want to bring more products to us and more molds. But what we do have, it is about a 3-week lead time for your order to shipped out. So when you place it, we'll have it produced for you in 3 weeks.
And how about mixing those? So it's produced, 52 or 56 foot truck, whatever they're being put into. Are the MOQs, is there more flexibility on that side, or is that still tough because of just how the production process is? And there's got to be some sort of minimum amount of the plastic or products used between switching.
You're 100% right. I mean, is there flexibility? Sure. Because, if you're a big customer and you say, hey, I want to just kick this off, I want to try this, we're usually pretty lenient. But when it comes to really, full production, we want people. I mean, we're probably 5,000 is where ours is, which is pretty low compared to China. I think usually China's between 5 and 10. Every once in a while, you'll get somebody at 3 if the product's big enough. And we'll do the same if the product's big enough. But it comes down to moving that tool. It comes down to flushing the pipes, all the tubing, the resins, colorant. And so, yeah, the manufacturing process itself is what dictates minimum runs and MOQs.
Yeah. And Ryan, again, like I mentioned in the beginning, or just when we were talking privately, like for my company, New Air, our purchase process is a little different. We're not doing a ton of, some of our products are, but most are not plastic injection molding. What would a potential customer or new customer have to bring to you? Are they have to bring the tool, or, is that done together between you and the customer, or do they do the engineering on their end and they're bringing that to you? Talk to us a little bit about how that process works.
Well, it happens on all. So every potential variant that you just mentioned are true. So we have customers who say, hey, I've got an extra tool. I want to bring your way. So they get it sent to us. We import it. We now have it. We shoot for them. We have others who say, hey, we have a tool and we want to move it from one facility to the other. That gets a little bit more tricky for them, but if they're strong enough and powerful enough, then they can do that. And then we have ones that come to us with a CAD ready package, or a production ready CAD package that we'll partner with a tool maker and be a part of the tool making process to make sure it all ties in well with our production model. And then we bring that tool in house. The customer pays for it. There are models, and we'll probably eventually do it, where if we have the right customer, we'll pay for it and then amortize the tool back to them. Or if it gets to a point where we're doing generic stuff, we'll pay for the tool because it will be something that we can keep, or even OEM it under a different brand for somebody else. So there's lots of different ways to approach it. One thing we don't do is we don't make our own tools. We have to use partners. And as of today, we only partner with some Chinese partners because they're so good at what they do, and their prices are just so much better than anywhere we can find in North America, including Mexico.
Yeah. And what is a typical range? Obviously, I know you're answering me, well, it depends, but what is the range of a tool? Just give us some ballparks there.
Sure. Well, so it depends on the size of the product. So I'll give you some examples. So if you're looking at, say, a little utensil set. So you've got really little utensils, and there's going to be 3 sizes of them. So it's a little family mold of utensils, and it's going to go on probably 120 ton press. So that will probably be anywhere from a $15,000 to $20,000 tool, and it will fit on a 120. And then we have we have a 780 ton machine where think of, a big, high chair seat that doesn't have any hinges. And so it's all one part. And so that tool will probably be about $120,000. So anywhere from probably that 10 to 120 in the size of machines that we have, which cover a big range of retail products from really small to really big.
Yeah, that's helpful for sure. I think you talked about it a little bit already with shipping, but are there any other ways that dollars are lost, in the process of shipping? Or I guess another way to say it is areas where US-based businesses can kind of gain even better margins by working with a Mexican factory?
Well, I think it's deciding kind of how to take a look at every lane and go, how can we find pennies here? And so for us, we're kind of partnering with a 3PL in Phoenix because it obviously makes a lot of sense. We have our headquarters are there. It's a 6-hour drive from Phoenix, from Hermosillo. It also feeds the rest of the country really well, where it can almost go the countrywide when it comes to the zones and zoning to get there within 2 days to everything. So it's a great drop location. And since it's a 6-hour drive and we're shipping a ton of our products from our factory to that location, investing in a couple of trailers and a couple of single bed trucks, having it be on the Mexican side for cost reasons, and then running up our own. So we handle the dray. So instead of paying that $800 dray cost, it costs us $200 for that 53-foot truck to go up there. And then finding out a way to have that trailer filled with U.S. goods going back across the border so it's not deadheading back is a huge opportunity. So working with a broker that can make things go that way. That's, I know, extreme, but it's just as business owners, we have to take a look at the things that don't make sense to us. We know how to make the product. We know that it's going to cost X. We know how much we're going to sell it for, and you're going to tell Target they need to pay a little bit more. But it's identifying, like we talked about off air, money in the mundane and pennies is in the profits in the pennies. It's where do you find those little pieces of profit that's being overlooked? A big one too is quite honestly shipping with UPS, FedEx, USPS, and finding the ways to get the best rates and not accept rack rates and not accept you're a small business and so you're going to get a small business rate from them. It's finding out how to partner with people who have much better rates and splitting the profit. That's an awesome strategy to use.
Yeah, and that's so important right now. I mean, I've seen their rates have just gone. It's like healthcare, somehow they've got into the healthcare boat where their rates have gone up so much year after year after year.
Because they can.
Yeah. I mean, they have, Amazon's like done their own thing, right? So they have their own trucking. And so, UPS and FedEx, realize that, and they're almost, they're not a customer, right? Amazon, I think, cut out FedEx and had some problems with that and are cutting back on UPS or all the way out. I don't know how far at this point, but for the typical business, yeah, they can. They have that monopoly. Also in the questions that we kind of went back and forth earlier, you mentioned that having a business analyst is vital. I would love to hear your thoughts on that and, what the CEOs listening now, what they should be thinking about.
I think it's being able to identify the areas that we forget about. It's kind of like in your household where, something kind of gets put on the counter, and if it stays there for 3 or 4 days, it becomes a fixture, right? And then pretty soon you're like, why is that there? And I think we sometimes as the business owners or people that are building our businesses, we look at products and we go, it is. I mean, here's the product. And we never think of it again because we're cycling through the numbers. And I think where the business analysts have come in so important for me is getting them to constantly looking at the business going, is this a good product to have? Do we need to end of life it? Do we need to focus on something else? Is it taking away from us being better in other areas? Are we not putting enough into this product? It's being able to really analyze to the nth degree and almost hourly, if not daily, the trends of your products and how they flow, especially with business to consumer and Amazon and all the social media platforms. It's all built on trending. And so how do you help that trending along and also get rid of the things that won't trend well for you without a lot of focus?
Now, Ryan, I hope I'm not being too naive here, but so we have a demand planner, obviously, and that demand planner, helps with, identifying a lot of the things you're talking about, but maybe not, to the full extent. It sounds like like the skill set you're talking about goes a lot into sales. Or is a business analyst, in your view, is it the same as a demand planner, or I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of what's in their duties. I'm sure people listening, if they don't have a business analyst, it's always fun to hear how people have their org charts set up, and also, what are the different functions that other CEOs find important.
Well, I think a demand planner it can be a part of that. In my organization, we have our demand planner is separate from our business analyst, and the business analyst is more a lot of times part of your product management team. So that business analyst will actually be the ones that keep the product CDOs. I don't know what CDO stands for anymore, but it basically takes a product when you start something out and you take a look at its value proposition. And so you put in all the parameters and spits it out and says if it's a viable product or not. And I think the thing about a business analyst is that they're taking those product CDOs and they're running those numbers consistently instead of just when you're looking at it, if it's something you should bring to market. And so when you talk to somebody, when I talk to my business analyst, I'm like, well, how does a CDO look today on X product? She's like, well, it's improved quite a bit since we changed this model, and we were able to drop the price a little bit at the retailer level. And so they've been able to then drop down to the consumer, and we're seeing a good pop of it. And so it's being able to constantly to see the shifting aspects of your products, because gosh, there was a time where I was selling a high chair that sold really well and revenue wise was really high. I was losing $2.50 every one I sold. And I did it for about a year and a half. So I think it's just having somebody with truly their fingers on the pulse of the products that we can't do as the CXX strategist, right?
Yeah, I know that's super helpful. It makes a lot of sense as well. Well, listen, I enjoyed talking about, nearshoring, and, we're looking all over the world. Like I think a lot of companies are, right? So this is, it's a super helpful conversation. Just wanted to ask you one last question, being the CEO of a couple different companies, what's been your biggest mistake and what have you learned from it?
Oh man. My biggest mistake with Boon was not being physically present with choosing my first sourcing company. And that was a huge mistake and nearly cost us our business. And dealing in China, and when I was so fresh to what that meant. Looking back on that seems really small, but it could have stopped us right in our tracks. I think the second biggest one is for me, or now that's probably more pertinent, is understanding how to manage as the majority owner and being at the top of something and pushing a kind of a monarchy-led democracy, because I've gone wrong usually on the side of pushing a democracy so much that it makes it so decision-making is slow. It also makes it so that people kind of forget their place at the table, and things go awry and they break down. And so I think it's learning how to manage from the top, because I've always made myself manage from not the top. And it's been a very strange, year and a half trying to master the art of being a monarch instead of being a senator.
Yeah, and to clarify, does that mean learning how to delegate and create a team that thinks on their own, or does that mean actually reining more of that in and being more, quicker to decision making and leading? Which side are we talking about here?
Well, see, what's funny is, obviously the art of delegation is vital, and the art of having people feel fantastic inside your organization. What I've learned is you can take that too far.
Okay, got it.
Especially as a leader, as a CEO, as a co-founder, as a founder, as the person who has all the money at stake. There, you can push that too far where it gets. So I think the art of delegation, man, you can never stress it enough, and you have to be perfect at it. But it also means that you don't give a sense of authority beyond what their authority should be, because you think that would be good. It seems like it'd be the right thing to do, and it backfires every time. And so I don't know. It's a psychological thing that I'm going to have to really, really think about, because I've always loved the thought of pure democracy inside a company, and it doesn't work.
Well, listen, it's so interesting you bring that up. And I think all the CEOs are kind of shaking their heads. It's really, we want to delegate because we want the team to kind of take the reins, right? And then, like you said, that can go too far where, hey, the team also needs that single point of leadership.
Yes.
So there is that balance. And there's always going to be conversations and people feeling maybe, things are unfair. There's always too many fires in other people's opinion, But listen, it's like you said, it's such a tough one. And I think that's a great comment. That's a good way to finish this podcast. I think a lot of people, or, maybe the more politically correct angle is, hey, and we need to delegate and work on more delegation, which, you often hear that. But it is nice to hear a comment going the other direction that, hey, this can go too far and there's got to be leadership within a company.
Truly. Hey, Luke, can I make one comment too, just about the manufacturing in Mexico that I'm sure people would find interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I
was on kind of a speaking tour there towards a period of USMCA to talk to senators and all the local and state senators and congressmen around what does manufacturing in Mexico mean? Because there for a while, politically, it was looked down upon, and why is it good for America? And so I've learned a lot about this. And one, on average, 40% of all Mexican goods that are exported to the United States are made from U.S. raw material, and which is a very interesting thing. From our factory, it's 80% of all of our raw material is American. And so think of this example. You have a toaster and Mexico exports it to us for $10. Well, we had exported to Mexico $4 of raw material. So what's the trade deficit between Mexico and the U.S. in this example? What do you think it is? So $10 toaster, $4 raw material.
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
60%, I guess, trade deficit.
$6, right? That's the trade deficit. Yep. The problem is that when we looked at trade deficit mathematics and when it was created, they did not think of this scenario. And so it's actually only a $2 trade deficit because we put $4 towards the toaster. They put $6 towards the toaster. And there's a $2 trade deficit between us, but it's not looked that way. And so we look at Mexico going, well, we have a trade deficit with them. In all reality, when the right math is put into play, there's not a trade deficit with Mexico, and we're very symbiotic, and it's a beautiful relationship. And so in China has less than 1% raw material is American. So I think that's a very important thing for people to recognize when it comes to partnering with Mexico. You're partnering with a neighbor. Number one, you're solving some immigration issues. You're also solving some drug issues, and you're also driving more American jobs in ways that you're not when you're getting it from different types of countries that are farther away than Mexico.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan. You're way closer to it than I am. From my sense, I don't think there is the pushback or animosity. I think, people look at, Canada and Mexico as our neighbors, and we want to do more and more business, hopefully with our neighbors and North Americans as much as possible. But obviously you're going to have more of a pulse on it, but I'm glad you brought up that example. I think it's a really good one. And I think there's more to it than just the trade deficit, just strategically and all of our allies and everything else that's involved. So good point. How can listeners find you and learn more about you? Our
website's BRH2 Plastics.com. And I'm right there. You can get a hold of me pretty easy. I think either through it's an info email or it's Ryan at BRH2 Plastics.com. Yeah, so I think that's the easiest way. I'm on LinkedIn, which is always a positive way for business people to get together. I'm not on any of the other social medias, and so probably people aren't either because it takes up so much time. Except for you, you're a podcaster, so you got to be on there.
No, well, I have to grin and bear it. I'm not big into social, but listen, we'll have all that in the show notes, and I definitely encourage you guys to check them out and check out Ryan's company. And really appreciate you coming on this episode of the Page One podcast, sponsored by Retail Band. And I hope everybody has really enjoyed this interview today. I really appreciate your reviews on iTunes and hope you all join us for the next interview. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Page One podcast with Luke Peters. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to double your online sales? Check out www.retailband.com. And don't forget to join us next week with our next amazing guest.